You're listening to Audiology. Support our work on Patreon, and be sure to submit your requests for topics in the comments below. Alexei Navalny was a well-known figure in Russia due to his roles as an opposition leader, lawyer, and anti-corruption activist. Born on the 4th of June 1976, he sadly passed away on the 16th of February 2024. He was known for organizing protests against the government and for attempting to bring about reforms to combat corruption. He particularly focused his efforts against President Vladimir Putin's administration. As part of his work, Navalny was a member of the Russian Opposition Coordination Council, led the Russia of the Future Party, and founded the Anti-Corruption Foundation, which is often abbreviated as the FBK. Navalny's efforts in fighting for human rights were recognized internationally. He was named a prisoner of conscience by Amnesty International and received the prestigious Sakharov Prize. By 2021, his reach was considerable with more than 6 million followers on YouTube, where he exposed corruption in Russia, encouraged political action, and broadcasted his political endeavors. He once famously referred to the ruling party in Russia, United Russia, as a party of crooks and thieves during a radio interview in 2011, a phrase that caught on with the public. His political career was marred by legal troubles. In July 2013, he was given a suspended sentence for embezzlement, but was still able to stand in the Moscow mayoral election, where he finished second. This sentence, along with another suspended sentence handed down in December 2014 for similar charges, was seen by many as attempts to prevent him from running for office. Although the European Court of Human Rights would later rule that his right to a fair trial was violated, the convictions were never overturned. These convictions also led to his disqualification from the 2018 presidential race, and his appeal was rejected by the Russian Supreme Court. Navalny continued to stir the political pot by releasing a documentary in 2017 that accused then Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev of corruption, sparking widespread protests. He also launched a strategy called smart voting, aimed at challenging the ruling party in elections. In a dramatic turn of events, Navalny was poisoned with a nerve agent in August 2020, leading to his hospitalization and later treatment in Germany. He openly accused Putin of being behind the attack, and investigations pointed to the involvement of federal security agents. Despite the risks, Navalny returned to Russia in January 2021, only to be arrested for allegedly violating parole while he was recovering abroad, prompting further demonstrations across the country. Navalny faced ongoing legal challenges following his arrest, with his suspended sentence being converted into an actual prison sentence and his organizations being shut down by the authorities, who labeled them as extremist. He was given additional prison time in 2022, which was further extended by 19 years on extremism charges in August 2023, setting his release date for December 2038. Navalny remarked that the duration of his sentence was tied to either his life or the lifespan of the current political regime. In a concerning development, Navalny disappeared from prison for about 3 weeks in December 2023. He was later discovered to have been moved to a penal colony in the Arctic Circle. Not long after, on the 16th of February 2024, Russian prison authorities announced the tragic news of his death at only 47 years old. Alexei Navalny has roots in both Russia and Ukraine. His father hailed from Zalicia, a village close to the border with Belarus. This village was moved because of the Chernobyl disaster. Navalny himself was raised in Obninsk, which is about 62 miles from Moscow. He often spent summers in Ukraine with his grandmother, where he learned to speak Ukrainian. His parents, Anatoly Navalny and Lyudmila Navalnaya, have owned a basket-weaving business in Kobyakovo, a village in the Vologda region, since 1994 and were still running it as of 2012. Navalny completed his high school education in 1993 at Kalininets, a school that matches a Level 3 in the International Standard Classification of Education System. In 1998, he earned a law degree from the People's Friendship University of Russia. Navalny continued his studies in the field of securities and exchanges at the Financial University under the government of the Russian Federation, completing his studies there in 2001. He was awarded a scholarship to Yale University's Yale World Fellows Program, which he attended in 2010. Starting in 1998, Navalny worked as a lawyer for various companies in Russia. In 2009, he became an official advocate and joined the Bar Association of the Kirov region, with a registration number 43/547. After moving to Moscow in 2010, he transferred his membership to the Moscow Bar Association, where he was registered under the number 77/9991. However, following a court ruling in the Kirovl's case in November 2013, Navalny lost his status as an advocate. Alexei Navalny is married to Yulia Abrosimova, and together they have 2 children. Their daughter Daria, who is also known as Dasha, started her studies at Stanford University in September 2019, and they also have a son named Zakhar. Since 1998, Navalny has mainly lived in a 3-room apartment located in the Marino district, which is in the southeast part of Moscow. Originally, Navalny didn't believe in any religion, but he eventually joined the Russian Orthodox Church. He has shared that becoming part of the church has given him a sense of belonging to something big and meaningful. On January 17, 2021, Navalny found himself arrested again. This happened when he was coming back to Russia, after he had to receive medical care in Germany. He needed that treatment because of a poisoning attempt on his life that took place back in Russia. Following his arrest, he was first placed in the IK2 penal colony, but later was moved to the IK6 maximum security prison in Melikovo within Vladimir Oblast. In May 2021, the organization Amnesty International recognized Navalny as a prisoner of conscience. What this means is that Amnesty International believes that Navalny is locked up primarily for his political beliefs and actions, not for any crime. On February 16, 2024, news came out from Russia that Alexei Navalny, a well-known critic of the Russian government, has passed away. The Russian Federal Penitentiary Service confirmed that Navalny died while he was serving a 19-year sentence at a prison camp, formerly known as Corrective Colony FKU, IK3, located in the village of Karp in the Russian Arctic. The following day, Navalny's spokesperson, Kira Yarmysh, backed up this announcement. She also called for Navalny's body to be returned to his family. He was only 47 years old. Navalny's death sparked a wave of protests, not just in Russia but around the world. In Russia alone, more than 100 people who were protesting got arrested. Leaders and politicians from all over are pointing fingers at the Russian authorities, holding them responsible for what happened. Let's break down the complex details of Alexei Navalny's political journey into more digestible segments for our listeners. Starting in the year 2000, Alexei Navalny decided to get involved in politics. He joined the Russian United Democratic Party, known as Yabloko, because he felt a new law was unfair to smaller parties, including Yabloko itself. Although Navalny wasn't particularly enthusiastic about Yabloko or similar organizations, he became an active member, eventually taking on leadership roles within the party's Moscow branch. He also spearheaded a youth movement called Democratic Alternative, which organized televised debates that garnered media attention but were cut short by the authorities. In 2006, Navalny supported a nationalist march in Moscow, emphasizing that Yabloko did not endorse hatred or xenophobia. His relationship with Yabloko ended in 2007 when he called for the resignation of the party's leader. That same year, he co-founded a nationalist movement focusing on immigration policy. Jumping to the protests in 2011 following disputed parliamentary elections, Navalny emerged as a key figure and was arrested for participating. While in jail, he encouraged Russians to unite against then-Prime Minister Vladimir Putin. After his release, Navalny led a 50,000-strong rally in Moscow. Moving on to Navalny's own political ambitions, in 2012, technology was a key feature of his allies' plan to start a new political party, though Navalny kept his distance due to legal challenges. Despite hurdles, he supported the party, which underwent name changes and faced registration issues. By 2015, the Justice Ministry disbanded the party, but Navalny pushed forward, preparing for upcoming elections. In 2013, the Moscow mayoral election was a significant moment for Navalny. Though initially blocked from running due to legal challenges, he was ultimately allowed to participate and performed surprisingly well, garnering 27% of the vote with an energetic campaign, which relied heavily on volunteers. Despite claims of election fairness from experts, Navalny disputed the results but was unsuccessful in his legal appeals. Fast-forwarding to the presidential elections of 2018, Navalny's candidacy was fraught with obstacles. Despite a strong anti-corruption stance and a serious injury from an assault, his bid was blocked because of a prior conviction. Navalny called for an election boycott, and his protests against the decision led to multiple arrests. In the local Moscow City Duma elections of 2019, Navalny supported independent candidates, resulting in widespread protests and his arrest. During this year, he also experienced a suspicious allergic reaction that many, including his own doctor, suspected was a result of chemical poisoning. Navalny also opposed constitutional amendments in 2020 that would allow Putin to extend his presidency, which were later approved in a national vote. Earlier, an online poll in 2010 had unexpectedly shown high support for Navalny as a mayoral candidate of Moscow, highlighting his influence in opposition politics. Finally, Navalny's public visibility, as measured by the Levada Center polls, grew from 37% in 2013 to 55% in 2017, but his actual support for a presidential run remained relatively modest. As of September 2020, 20% of Russians backed his activities, but feelings about him were mixed, with some expressing respect and others disapproval. In 2008, Alexei Navalny decided to use his investment in the stocks of 5 major Russian oil and gas companies to push for financial transparency, which was legally required but allegedly obstructed by corrupt senior managers. He focused on companies such as Rosneft, Gazprom, and others. Come November 2010, Navalny made public secret audit papers from Transneft, revealing a staggering $4 billion theft by company leaders during the Eastern Siberia Pacific Ocean pipeline construction. This was detailed on Navalny's own blog. The following month, he introduced the Rospil project, aimed at exposing graft in government contracts, exploiting the system that mandates publishing tenders and awarded contracts online. The term Rospil is actually a play on words, referring to the illegal siphoning of state funds. In May 2011, Navalny tackled everyday corruption with the Rosyama initiative, giving citizens the tools to report potholes and prompting government action. A few months later, he disclosed documents about a shady real estate deal between Hungary and Russia involving Viktor Vekselberg and suspected collusion after a Moscow property was flipped for a massive profit, leading to the detention of 3 Hungarian officials. Fast forward to February 2012, Navalny alleged misappropriation of Russian funds earmarked for the Chechen Interior Ministry led by Ramzan Kadyrov. That May, he accused Deputy Prime Minister Igor Shuvalov, through documentation, of benefiting from transactions involving prominent businessmen Abramovich and Usmanov, an assertion both parties recognized as legitimate but legal. In July, Navalny retaliated against a personal attack by suggesting Alexander Bastrykhin, a top Russian law enforcement official, had stakes in secret foreign businesses, an accusation supported by documents on Navalny's blog. In August 2018, Navalny's spotlight turned to Viktor Zolotov, accusing him of embezzling over $29 million from the National Guard. Not long after, Zolotov, clearly incensed, challenged Navalny to an old-fashioned duel in a video, vowing to turn Navalny into mincemeat. The story continues with Navalny's 2017 exposé titled "He is not diamond to you," calling out then-Prime Minister Medvedev for corruption. Although dismissed by authorities as the claims of a convicted criminal, a subsequent wave of anti-corruption protests swept through Russian cities on March 26. At these protests, detentions were widespread, with disparities between official and human rights reported figures. Navalny himself was detained, fined, and jailed for organizing the unsanctioned protests and resisting arrest. On the international stage, Navalny once again struck a nerve on January 19, 2021, releasing an investigation accusing President Vladimir Putin of building a palatial estate with ill-gotten money. This colossal complex on the Black Sea, estimated to be larger than Monaco and featuring extensive security and luxury, allegedly cost over $1.35 billion and was surrounded by an FSB-controlled land perimeter. The investigation even included detailed visuals of the estate, supported by leaked photographs and information claiming to originate from a contractor. The video detailing these findings went viral, amassing tens of millions of views in just weeks. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov dismissed the accusations as fraudulent, warning against funding deceit, while Putin himself denied any connection to the palace, which was later claimed by Arkady Rotenberg, an associate of Putin's. Let's discuss the Kirovly's case involving Alexei Navalny. On July 30, 2012, the Russian Investigative Committee charged him with embezzlement. They claimed Navalny conspired to steal timber from Kirovlis, a state-run company, back in 2009. At the time, he was serving as an advisor to Kirov's governor, Nikita Belik. This wasn't the first probe into the allegations. An earlier investigation had been dropped due to a lack of evidence. Navalny was freed without bail, but was told he couldn't leave Moscow. Describing the charges as weird and baseless, Navalny suggested that the authorities were testing the waters to see how protesters and the West would react. His supporters gathered to protest outside the offices of the investigative committee. In April 2013, a report by Loeb and Loeb LLP criticized the actions of the Russian Federation, concluding that the legal system was being misused to isolate and intimidate political adversaries. The trial began in Kirov on April 17, 2013, and on July 18, Navalny received a 5-year jail sentence for embezzlement, which was identical to the prosecution's request except for a 1-year reduction. However, that same evening, prosecutors argued that the sentence should not take effect until endorsed by a higher court, leading to Navalny's release the next day pending further hearings. This move by the prosecutors was seen as unprecedented by legal experts. A court suspended the jail sentence on October 16, 2013, but it remained a significant obstacle to Navalny's political ambitions. The European Court of Human Rights weighed in on February 23, 2016, finding that Russia had denied Navalny a fair trial and ordered the government to pay him for legal costs and damages. After Russia's Supreme Court overturned the 2013 verdict, referring it back to a lower court, the lower court repeated its previous sentencing on February 8, 2017. Navalny voiced his intention to annul this sentence, asserting that it contradicted the European Court of Human Rights decision. Switching to the Yves Rocher case, in 2008, Oleg Navalny, Alexei's brother, made a deal with Yves Rocher Vostok to fulfill delivery obligations through Glavpodpiska, a company he ran. Subcontracts were made with other firms, but in late 2012 the investigative committee began examining the arrangement. The prosecution claimed Glavpodpiska embezzled funds by charging more for the service than paid to subcontractors. The defense contested these charges, insisting they engaged in standard business practices, while Yves Rocher denied suffering any losses. Alexei Navalny was ascribed no active role in this business by both witnesses and defense lawyers. Navalny's home arrest began on February 28, 2014, barring him from contacting anyone outside of his immediate circle. Deeming the arrest politically motivated, Navalny lodged a complaint with the European Court of Human Rights. His home detention terms were slightly relaxed over time, allowing him to eventually communicate with co-defendants and the press, but his requests to end the detention were repeatedly denied. On December 30, 2014, both Navalny brothers were found guilty of fraud and money laundering, with Alexei receiving a suspended sentence. Oleg was imprisoned. Despite breaking his house arrest to join a Moscow protest, Alexei was swiftly returned home. The brothers turned to the European Court of Human Rights, which later ruled in 2017 that their convictions were arbitrary, unfair, and unforeseeable in application, violating human rights laws. After the Yves Rocher case, Navalny agreed to pay compensation, highlighting the case as a setup. Despite the challenges, he arranged to pay off the sum to avoid negatively impacting his brother's parole status. Lastly, additional investigations into Navalny's activities have been conducted, with varying allegations from embezzlement to failing to fulfill advertising contracts. In each instance, Navalny and his supporters have dismissed the accusations, and he has continued to have confrontations with Russian authorities in various legal settings. Prominent figures, including Mikhail Gorbachev and Alexei Kudrin, have spoken out against the trials, suggesting political motivations, while others such as Vladimir Zhirinovsky have considered these outcomes as warnings to those opposed to the Russian government. International entities, including the European Union and the United States, have expressed concerns over the rule of law in Russia in response to these cases. Public opinion in Russia indicates fluctuating views on the legitimacy and fairness of the charges against Navalny, reflecting the diverse perspectives held by the Russian populace. On August 20, 2020, Alexei Navalny suddenly fell very sick on a flight from Tomsk to Moscow, and the plane had to make an emergency landing in Omsk, where he was rushed to the local emergency hospital. The dramatic moment he fell ill was caught on video, showing the airline staff rushing to him while he was heard screaming. Navalny later explained that he was not screaming from pain. He was terrified because he felt that he was dying. Kira Yarmish, Navalny's spokeswoman, shared that he was in a coma and needed a ventilator to breathe. She mentioned that the only thing he had that morning was a cup of tea from the airport, leading to suspicions that his drink might have been spiked. Doctors initially thought that a toxin could have been added to his hot drink, which would quickly get into his system. At first, the hospital staff said his condition was stable but severe, and they believed he was likely poisoned. But after the police appeared at the hospital, the doctors became less open about what happened, with one even saying that poisoning was just one of many possibilities they were exploring. A specially equipped plane from Germany came to take Navalny to Berlin for better care. Initially, doctors in Omsk said he was too ill to travel, but eventually they allowed him to go. Shortly after his arrival in Berlin, German doctors confirmed he had been poisoned with a cholinesterase inhibitor, a type of chemical that affects the nervous system. Ivan Zhdanov, who leads Navalny's anti-corruption foundation, speculated that the poisoning might be linked to their investigative work. By September 2nd, the German government confirmed that a Novichok nerve agent, similar to the one used in the Skripal case in the United Kingdom, had poisoned Navalny. This revelation led to international calls for Russia to provide an explanation. German doctors later announced that by September 7th, Navalny had come out of his coma, and by September 15th, his spokeswoman said that he planned to return to Russia. On September 17th, Navalny's team found out that his hotel room's water bottle had traces of the nerve agent, indicating he might have been poisoned before even reaching the airport. Navalny was well enough to leave the hospital by September 23rd, and on October 6th, the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons confirmed that samples from Navalny did indeed contain a Novichok nerve agent. In December, a joint investigation by several news outlets, including The Insider, Bellingcat, CNN, and Der Spiegel, accused Russia's Federal Security Service agents of being involved in the poisoning. They revealed that a special unit within the Federal Security Service had been following Navalny for 3 years, potentially even having tried to poison him before. Speaking to the Spanish newspaper El País, Navalny commented on President Putin's lengthy time in power potentially affecting his judgment, suggesting that 20 years at the top could make anyone lose touch with reality and feel untouchable. On December 21st, Navalny released a video where he tricked a man believed to be a chemical weapons expert named Konstantin Kudryavtsev into a phone conversation by posing as a security official. During the call, the man disclosed that the poison was put on Navalny's clothes, specifically his underwear, and admitted that Navalny would have died if not for the quick emergency landing and immediate medical attention. Further investigations in January 2021 connected the Federal Security Service unit that tailed Navalny to the suspicious deaths of other activists and politicians. In response to these events, the European Union, the United Kingdom, and the United States imposed sanctions on several high-ranking Russian officials. On January 17, 2021, Alexei Navalny flew back to Russia from Germany and landed at Moscow's Sheremetyevo International Airport. His plane was originally supposed to arrive at Vnukovo Airport but was redirected. Upon arriving, he was detained at passport control. The reason for his detainment, as confirmed by the Federal Penitentiary Service, was a potential parole violation from leaving Russia. He had previously been given a suspended sentence in 2014 for the Yves Rocher case, a conviction he claimed was politically motivated. The European Court of Human Rights in 2017 agreed that his trial was not fair. After calling for his followers to protest, Navalny found himself facing a potential prison sentence. Not only did Amnesty International call for his release, labeling him a prisoner of conscience, but a makeshift courtroom also decided to hold him until February 15, 2021. While he was in jail, a report he had worked on alleging corruption by President Putin was released, sparking protests throughout Russia on January 23, 2021. A Moscow court on February 2, 2021, turned Navalny's suspended sentence into a prison term of more than 2.5 years in a labor colony, minus house arrest time served. This decision was criticized internationally, with countries including the United States, Germany, and France, as well as the European Union, voicing their disapproval. Furthermore, Navalny faced a libel case accusing him of defaming a World War II veteran, charges he described as a political attack meant to tarnish his reputation. Despite the risk of a 2-year prison sentence, his lawyer pointed out a change in law making the offense jailable occurred after Navalny's purported crime. The European Court of Human Rights demanded his immediate release, citing risks to Navalny's life. After receiving this directive from the ECHR on February 16, 2021, Russian authorities, including the Justice Minister, refused to comply, claiming it wasn't legally justifiable. In February 2021, Navalny's designation by Amnesty International as a prisoner of conscience was revoked due to his past nationalist statements. The designation was later restored in May, criticizing the Russian government's use of the revocation as justification to continue violating Navalny's human rights. By the end of February, Navalny was reported to have arrived at the Pokrov correctional colony. This led to the United States and European Union imposing sanctions on high-ranking Russian officials. That same March, Navalny claimed torture through sleep deprivation while in custody. His health deteriorated, and after announcing a hunger strike, his personal doctor, along with others, were detained trying to see him. The international community, including the United States and European Union, expressed concern for his well-being, with US President Biden calling his treatment totally unfair. Navalny's health condition prompted demands for proper care, and he was eventually moved to a hospital in April for vitamin therapy and later ended his hunger strike. Turning to his political activities, in April 2021, Russian prosecutors sought to label Navalny's organizations as extremists. His ally Leonid Volkov called this an onset of broad political repression in Russia. Amidst legal pressure, Navalny's network ceased their activities preemptively before a court ruling in May, transitioning to different political entities. In June, he was designated by the Russian Prison Commission as a terrorist and extremist. Navalny faced added years to his prison sentence with new charges in February 2022. Prosecution witnesses even refused to testify against him, alleging pressure from investigators. During his trial, Navalny spoke out against Russia's invasion of Ukraine, linking it to internal Russian issues. He received a 9-year maximum security sentence, which was labeled a sham by Amnesty International. Despite appeals, the sentence was upheld and new extremism charges were imposed in May. In June, Navalny was transferred to a maximum security prison, continuing to face legal challenges. In July, Navalny relaunched his anti-corruption foundation internationally. Defendants against his closing court actions included his legal team, who were themselves arrested for extremism in October. Navalny also faced solitary confinements and other punitive measures for his actions within the prison. By December 2023, Navalny's location became unknown following his 19-year sentence to a special regime colony. It turned out that he had been moved to the notorious IK-3 colony, commonly known as Polar Wolf. Tragically, he passed away on February 16, 2024. Throughout this time, non-governmental organizations like the Human Rights Center Memorial had recognized Navalny as a political prisoner, a label also supported by the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. On the 16th of February, the Federal Penitentiary Service in the Yamalo-Nenets Autonomous District released a statement regarding Navalny losing consciousness following a walk. He received immediate attention from the medical staff at the penal colony, and an ambulance team was summoned to the scene. Russian state media agencies, quoting officials from the Labitnangi City Hospital, stated that an ambulance reached Navalny in under 7 minutes and attempted life-saving measures for over 30 minutes. Despite their efforts, Navalny could not be revived, and news of his death was reported at 2:19 p.m. Moscow time. On the following day, his death was officially confirmed by his spokesperson, Kira Yarmish, who also received an official notification given to Navalny's mother, Lyudmila. Yarmish has requested that Navalny's remains be handed over to the family. The Russian Investigative Committee has initiated an in-depth investigation into Navalny's death. His remains are expected to be transported to Moscow for an autopsy. Determining the exact cause of death might take several weeks. Officials from the Polar Wolf penal colony reported that they had sent Navalny's body to a morgue in Salekhard, but it was not located there. The Russian Investigative Committee has communicated to the family that Navalny's body will be returned after they establish the cause of death through the investigation, despite previously indicating that the inquiry was complete. According to the law, the authorities can retain his body for up to a month. Yarmish suspects that the Russian authorities are concealing the true circumstances of his death. Alexander Polupan, the the doctor who previously treated Navalny for poisoning, spoke with Meduza and expressed skepticism about the swiftness of medical assistance provided. Polipan mentioned that an autopsy is essential to confirm a diagnosis of a detached blood clot, and noted that Navalny had no pre-existing conditions that would typically lead to a thromboembolic event. Navalny's mother was informed he succumbed to sudden death syndrome, while his lawyer received information that the cause of death was uncertain. Experts have pointed out to Meduza that sudden death syndrome is not recognized in the International Classification of Diseases, 10th revision, a medical classification list that Russian doctors are required to use. An inmate from the Polar Wolf colony reported unusual activities at the prison around the time Navalny passed away, suggesting he may have actually died on the night of February 15th rather than the 16th. As early as 10 a.m. on that morning, prisoners were allegedly aware of his death, hours before the official announcements were made. The human rights organization Gulagu.net has alleged that multiple security cameras in the penal colony were not operational on the 15th and 16th of February, and that the individual performing the autopsy was instructed to declare that bruises found on Navalny's body occurred after his death. These claims have not been either confirmed or refuted by alternate sources. Yulia Navalnaya, the wife of Alexei Navalny, expressed that those responsible for her husband's death will face consequences. However, she mentioned her struggle to trust the news since it only comes from government sources, and she felt she couldn't trust President Putin's government because they lie constantly. Navalny's mother, Lyudmila Navalnaya, rejected any expressions of sympathy, noting that her son had appeared healthy and in good spirits during a prison visit on the 12th. Maria Pevchik, who leads the Anti-Corruption Foundation's board, claimed Navalny's legacy will live forever in millions and declared his death a murder. Journalist Andrei Zakharov starkly noted, Navalny did not die, he was killed. Boris Nadezhdin, an opposition politician, expressed hope that the news of Navalny's demise was inaccurate and praised Navalny's talents and bravery. His political party, Civic Initiative, called the death a political murder. Mikhail Khodorkovsky, a London-based former oligarch, called for Russians to vote for Navalny in the upcoming presidential election as a form of protest, and for Western nations to declare President Putin's government and the election results illegitimate. Leonid Volkov, another opposition politician, stated plainly, if this is true, then not Navalny died, but Putin killed Navalny, and only that. Exiled opposition politician Dmitry Gudkov insisted that any natural causes of Navalny's death could be traced back to his previous poisoning and alleged torture in prison, placing the blame squarely on President Putin. Nobel Peace Prize winner Dmitry Muratov of Novaya Gazeta described Navalny's passing as murder, saying he had been tortured and indicating that the human body couldn't withstand such treatment. Oleg Orlov, a human rights campaigner and co-chairman of Memorial, called it a crime of the regime. Writer Mikhail Zygar mourned the loss of Russia's future, and human rights activist Lev Ponomaryov urged the continuation of the fight. Crime writer Boris Akunin declared Navalny had become immortal with his death, and further acts by the dictator could not touch him. Leonid Solovyov, one of Navalny's lawyers, affirmed that he appeared normal during a visit on January 14th. As the news spread, citizens across Russia laid flowers at monuments to political repression victims, with over 100 arrested the first day and over 340 by the second. Authorities removed flowers and photographed people during these acts of remembrance, particularly at Moscow's Solovetsky Stone and Wall of Grief. Moreover, the Moscow prosecutor's office warned against mass protests. Regarding Russian government responses, President Putin's spokesperson Dmitry Peskov stated that President Putin had been informed of Navalny's death but didn't comment publicly. The directorate of the Investigative Committee for Yamalo-Nenets Autonomous Okrug started a procedural investigation, and the Federal Penitentiary Service commenced inspections. Russia's ruling party, United Russia, instructed its deputies to align with the Penitentiary Service's narrative or abstain from commenting. State-controlled media in Russia covered the death minimally. When international criticism emerged, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova criticized Western countries, and Dmitry Peskov described their reactions as absolutely rabid. Vyacheslav Volodin, a Putin ally, claimed Washington and various foreign critics were to blame. On the international stage, many Western countries' leaders and major international organization representatives directly or indirectly accused Russian authorities of involvement in Navalny's passing. Notably, leaders from the global south and most post-Soviet states in Central Asia and the Caucasus remained silent on the incident. Government reactions include a wide range of condolences and condemnations. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese lamented the tragic death and unforgivable treatment of Navalny, declaring Australia's stance that Russia was responsible. Bulgaria's Prime Minister Nicolae Denkov called Navalny a symbol against dictatorship and emphasized the importance of democracy. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau described Navalny's death as a chilling reminder of President Putin's nature, attributing his death to Navalny's stance against the Kremlin. In the Czech Republic, Foreign Minister Jan Lipavsky condemned Russia for acting violently against those dreaming of a better future. Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas highlighted Navalny's death as an exemplar of the rogue regime Russia is under President Putin's leadership, emphasizing the need for accountability. Finland's voices included Prime Minister Petteri Orpo, who assigned responsibility to the Russian leadership, and President Sauli Niinistö, who echoed the sentiment. French President Emmanuel Macron honored Navalny's memory and dedication to courage and commitment. Georgian President Salome Zurabichvili and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz offered their condolences and recognized the tragedy of Navalny's situation. Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis mourned Navalny's sacrifice and emphasized his fight for democracy. Iceland's President Gudni Thieth, Johannesson, Irish leaders Leo Varadkar and Michael Martin, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, Latvian President Edgars Rinkēvičs, and others from Lithuania, Moldova, the Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Poland, Spain, Sweden, Ukraine, the United Kingdom, and the United States, all made statements expressing sorrow, condemning Navalny's death and its context, and in many cases holding President Putin and the Russian regime accountable. International organizations like the European Union, NATO, and the United Nations, along with human rights organizations like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, echoed calls for accountability and further investigation. They honored Navalny's bravery and condemned the conditions that led to his death. Exiled opposition and human rights groups called for action and remembrance, acknowledging the significance of Navalny's fight for freedom and democracy. Finally, public demonstrations and tributes occurred worldwide, ranging from protests to floral tributes and statements from various public figures mourning Navalny and denouncing the circumstances of his passing. Here's how the information might be presented more conversationally for an audience listening aloud. Alexei Navalny, a prominent figure in Russian politics, initially had some strong nationalistic beliefs and was against immigration. Over time, though, it seems he shifted his stance, moving away from those early views. Speaking about corruption, back in February 2011, Navalny was very direct when he called the main Russian party United Russia a party of crooks and thieves during a conversation with Finam.fm radio. His comment became popular, turning into a call to action for the opposition. But soon after, he became a target for the government with a criminal investigation, something that the media and Navalny himself criticized as retaliatory and fabricated by security services. In regards to his nationalistic views, they have evolved. Navalny once identified as a nationalist Democrat in 2011 and was involved in organizing nationalist marches. He also advocated for stopping financial aid to regions he viewed as corrupt, like Chechnya. However, his position changed significantly over the years. Immigration was a contentious topic for Navalny, who at one point released anti-immigration materials advocating for the expulsion of migrants in 2007. His friend Leonid Volkov mentioned that Navalny came to regret those opinions. And while he briefly shared anti-immigration feelings after an incident involving a migrant led to riots in 2013, he later promoted dialogue and peaceful solutions instead of violence. By 2017, he showed support for regulated immigration, but still kept a critical perspective on its impact. Talking about Volkov, he revealed in 2017 that their team supports the legalization of same-sex marriage. Navalny's views on foreign policy have also changed. He once favored ideas typical of Russian leadership, like exerting influence over former Soviet territories, and supported factions in the Russo-Georgian War in 2008. But he's since expressed regret for his past remarks about Georgia and has shown support for movements like Black Lives Matter. Regarding global conflict, Navalny opposed Russia's participation in the Syrian civil war, arguing that Russia should focus on its own problems first. His stance on Ukraine has been particularly complex. Initially advocating for close connections with Ukraine and Belarus, Navalny completely changed his position after Russia took over Crimea. He called for tougher sanctions against those close to Putin and even suggested his own list of sanctions. Regarding Crimea, he declared that it was too complicated of an issue to just give it back to Ukraine, proposing a legitimate referendum to decide its future instead. Navalny criticized Putin's strategy toward Ukraine, blaming him for damaging Russia's reputation and its relationships with neighboring countries. Following the establishment of the Independent Orthodox Church of Ukraine, Navalny took to social media to criticize Putin for reversing centuries of history and influence in just 4 years. Moving ahead to 2022, he compared Russia's acknowledgement of the Donetsk and Luhansk republics to Soviet-era methods, labeling it a distraction from the country's actual problems. Navalny called for action, urging daily demonstrations against Russia's invasion of Ukraine. He believed that the cost of peace was worth the risk of imprisonment and branded Russia's state media as deceptive participants and potential war criminals of the future. Navalny's objection to the 2022 mobilization in Russia was adamant. In court, he questioned the necessity for civilian drafts when the military and security forces were already substantial. He continued to speak out despite the threat of solitary confinement, calling the draft a historic crime and criticizing the involvement of civilians in it. Looking at the future of Russia and Ukraine, Navalny hoped for an end to the occupation, the recognition of Ukraine's borders as they stood after the 1991 Soviet dissolution, and for Russia to compensate Ukraine. He also proposed a comprehensive international investigation into the wartime atrocities. And in a notable political move, Navalny and his colleagues rallied their supporters to protest Putin and his invasion of Ukraine by voting against him collectively on the third day of the Russian presidential election in 2024. Alexei Navalny was named Person of the Year 2009 by the Russian business newspaper Vedomosti and by the market observer Stock in Focus. On the 22nd of April 2010, he received an award from Finance magazine for his work in defending minority shareholders' rights. In 2010, he was also a Yale World Fellow, part of a Yale University program designed to build a network of up-and-coming leaders around the world. Navalny earned recognition from Foreign Policy magazine in 2011, landing a spot on the Foreign Policy Top 100 Global Thinkers list for his contributions to government transparency. He received this honor alongside Daniel Domscheit-Berg and Sami Ben-Garbia from Tunisia. Foreign Policy included him again the following year. In 2012, Time magazine listed him as one of the planet's 100 most influential people, making him the only Russian to make that list. The following year, he ranked 48th among the world's thinkers in a poll by Prospect, a UK magazine. He and his brother Oleg were awarded the prize of the Platform of European Memory and Conscience in 2015 for their courageous efforts for democracy in Russia. The platform viewed Oleg as a political prisoner and recognized Alexei for fighting corruption and authoritarianism. Time magazine in 2017 named Navalny one of the Internet's 25 most influential figures. Vedomosti also recognized him as the Politician of the Year 2017 and again in 2019. In 2021, Norwegian parliament members nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize, and an internet petition backing his candidacy gathered more than 38,000 signatures. After his imprisonment in February 2021, the Boris Nemtsov Foundation for Freedom honored him with the Boris Nemtsov Prize for Courage. Prague set up a viewpoint bearing Navalny's name, offering a view from the Russian embassy and located near both Boris Nemtsov Square and the Anna Politkovskaya Promenade. Navalny's daughter accepted the Moral Courage Award for him at the Geneva Summit for Human Rights and Democracy on June 8, 2021. He dedicated this award to political prisoners. In September of the same year, Time once again placed him on the list of the 100 most influential people. That September, he also received the Knight of Freedom Award from the Casimir Pulaski Foundation. The European Parliament's Sakharov Prize for Human Rights was awarded to him in October 2021 with David Sassoli, the President of the European Parliament, highlighting Navalny's fight against corruption in Vladimir Putin's regime, a struggle that almost cost Navalny his life. Additionally, he received the M100 Media Award from Germany in recognition of his commitment to freedom of expression. In 2023, the documentary film Navalny, telling his story and directed by Daniel Roher, won the Best Documentary category at both the 76th British Academy Film Awards and the 95th Academy Awards. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more content.